Yeah. I think I put myself in an unnecessary box.
And when we talk about that, we consider people to be like a balloon with an infinite capacity for expansion. However, when we talk about thinking outside the box, pushing the envelope, change does not take place. Growth does not take place inside that comfort zone.
No.
And when we help people label and identify the bonds and the barriers that created that comfort zone, be it drugs or alcohol or depression or anxiety or codependence, any number of those things. So when we identify and label those bonds and barriers, then we can step outside them. And I believe that kind of with your humor, this edgy type of humor, you're challenging people to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And to press themselves against that comfort zone and say, wait a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, because I already know when I'm going into it is what I'm going to talk about isn't the easiest thing to talk about for people, right? So my focus is, well, how do I get people to just be a little bit more comfortable with what they are going to be uncomfortable with? So I think humor is a great way to do that. The second you can make somebody laugh, you can get them to start thinking about because the defenses are down, right? It's like when you're at the bar and you're hitting on whoever, like just a random stranger, well, that girl's not going to want to talk to you. But the second you make whoever you're hitting on, whether it's a girl, guy, whatever, right? Like whoever you're hitting on, you make them laugh, the defenses are a little bit down. And that, like now you can actually have a conversation with them. It's the same thing with trying to do something more issue driven. I think comedy is a great vehicle for that. So I think comedy is a great way to tackle heavy subjects.
So you're talking about helping people be comfortable with difficult situations. When usually people's defense mechanisms to deal with unpleasant or unwelcome or difficult situations is usually just to avoid it or pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and that's part of the resistance that I get is the notion that you can't talk about it because it's uncomfortable or it's not clean, or it's a little bit too, rough and edgy, and well, we don't have a definitive solution for this. So maybe don't address, police brutality, or maybe don't address religion. Maybe don't address why white supremacy exists still in a society that we call modern and progressive. We don't have a clear-cut solution. So maybe you as a comedian shouldn't be addressing it, and I disagree. Now, you don't have to address it, right? Comedians don't have to do this, but I think it's a great way to get people to talk about it if that's your goal. So for me, that's always been something that I've given a shit about. I've always cared to make sure that, well, maybe this difficult thing isn't going to get solved if we keep ignoring it. And it seems to be affecting a lot of people's lives, including the comedians that are refusing to address it. To hell with it. I want to talk about it. And if I can make it funny, even better. That's the fun part to me, is the challenge of taking the absurdity and the ludicrousness of the behavior and the dark parts and trying to twist them to make them funny. That's a fun challenge. That's exciting to do. It keeps things exciting for me. And if I'm excited and I show that I'm excited, of course the crowd's going to come on board with me. But if I'm going to take this as just as a regular job that I don't really even care about, going up there and reciting something doesn't anybody any good, creatively or, addressing social issues. It just does no good to anybody.
So you can lead a horse to water. You cannot make them drink. However, you can make them thirsty. So what you're talking to me about, what you're talking to us about, is the vehicle that you use to make people thirsty and perhaps listen. Mm-hmm. And have an open beginner's type of mind, as the Buddha would say, is to do that through humor, to have them relax a bit and say, you know what, this guy's not preaching at me.
Yeah, I would hope so. I have gotten that before, I've gotten that I'm a little too preachy
Uh-huh.
before. But when you're kind of working with bigger ideas, in order to unpack them, we have to assume that there's probably a bunch of people that don't know what this big idea is, right? So if we're going to address the idea of positive psychology, or just the idea of finding happiness within your life and where that comes from, we have to unpack some of these things. That means introducing these ideas. But all of these little parts to it, introducing the idea, defining this thing, talking about different ways that you can find, that's all opportunities for jokes. That's all opportunities where, and it's stuff that I learned from when I was talking about my parents, when I was talking about being Indian and doing the Indian accent and goofing about small little racial stuff. I learned how to write the jokes beyond that. So now it's like unpacking that as, oh, I take that skill and apply it to this, right? So yeah, it becomes a vehicle to do that.
You speak a great deal in your stand-up acts and in your own personal blog,
Mm-hmm.
Forkful of Noodles,
Yeah.
different things like that, about the communication, miscommunication, misinterpretation,
Mm-hmm.
or complete lack of communication.
Yeah, I just don't think at this point in time, I don't think we're very good at talking to each other. And I think part of that involves this notion of, well, I need to be right and you need to be wrong, rather than, well, maybe I see things differently than you, and that's okay. But let's figure out where we differ and why we differ, and see if there isn't some way we can make this amicable, right? In an ideal world, that would be the way we could go about some conversations. But with and I think it goes back to like wanting to be famous, right? Wanting to get that viral video, wanting to get known for something. Is you say something outrageous, you want to sensationalize it, you want to hyperbolize things right off the bat. It's clickbait. That's what's getting those clicks, baby. The clicks get the money. So in that world, empathy and taking people's feelings in regard, taking people's beliefs in regard, and showing respect to each other just goes out the window, because it's
So
not about,
you're talking
yeah.
about empathy, and you're talking about talking with somebody rather
Mhm.
than at them.
Yes. Yeah.
And what people don't understand is that 90% of communication is listening. So most of the idea is that when most people talk and another person starts to talk, they maybe listen 20%, but mostly they're formulating about what they want to say back.
Right. Yeah. And to kind of take that back to comedy, that's the interesting aspect of it, is doing long form comedy. And my web series is like, at this point, each of the episodes that I put out are about 12 to 18 minutes, something like that. They're longer episodes. And there's a lot of people that are like, oh, maybe if you make them shorter, more people will want to listen. But the problem is, you can't do that, because these topics deserve the time and attention. They deserve taking a little bit more in-depth analysis, taking a little bit more care to talk about them. So me just rushing through it in 4 minutes and saying that if you deny climate change, you're a moron. There are 5 hurricanes that just happened. Right? Is like, that's not a way that
No, that's an attack.
that's an
Krish.
attack. Attacks are quick. But formulating a way to address and communicate with each other, that takes time.
Well, have you ever come up to someone and said, "You're a moron if you believe that," and they might think back and say, "Well, I guess you're right."
Again, right?
How often does that happen?
I have yet to see
Yet
proof
to have that happen.
yeah.
Huh?
So far, it's a 0%.
So when we attack people, it's all that does is set up a confrontation.
Yeah, and I think that's what is exciting for us. We've kind of built this world of, well, if you confront them, boy, are you the great one. We see all these things where it's somebody on Fox News and they just called the news anchor an asshole. It's like, oh, look at this. Finally, someone says it as it is. And it's like, no, you just insulted somebody. Cool. I'm glad you were able to say that to somebody else's face, and because that person, Bill O'Reilly, might be a jackass and be deserved to be called a jackass, but at the same time, you have not done anything to change Bill O'Reilly's mind about women's rights. You've done nothing to do that, right? You've just made him kind of feel bad for a minute, and then now he's just angry at you and anybody that thinks like you. Like, so we haven't arrived to a conclusion.
We talked earlier about, well, the individualistic type of society that we live in, where we're surrounded and bombarded by sights, sounds, as images on how we should be and what we should be thinking, and how others will think so much of us if we only look, smell, and taste like this.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often when I deal with people, I ask them to admit their part in the mess that's created, and the other party to admit the part in the mess they created. A debate contest in a debate society is you have to prove someone wrong.
Right.
Basically, you have to say your ideas are pieces of crap. They are worthless. Right. Now listen to me. I am right.
Right.
So, and they get points for that. They win. As in war, there are no winners in war. No one ever wins an argument, ever. Okay?
No, yeah. I mean, look at relationships. Can anyone legitimately say that they've won an argument in a relationship? And if you have, it's probably because you're not in a relationship anymore. It's like that's I've never been in an argument with any significant other that hasn't ended with both people being like, no. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown that at your head. That seemed to be uncalled for. Or maybe I shouldn't have called you the C word. That seemed to be a little uncalled for.
Well, the whole idea is when both parties admit their fault in it, then there can be some compromise.
Right.
You and I talked earlier before we started recording about having a debate format where a compromise has to be reached.
Yeah.
And that's the winner.
But that takes time. That's not an easy process because, again, you're unpacking two different belief systems.
Oh,
right?
And we often talk about on this program about how we live in a microwave world.
Right.
Where we want the popcorn in 3 minutes, and
Quick.
We want drive-in dry cleaners, pizza, pharmacies, banks. We want drive-in everything. And the idea is that Joanna and I talked about this, Joanna Lowe, and I believe we talked about it with Liz, about time is the most valuable asset we have. And of all the substances in the world, time's the one that we abuse the most.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's come to that point where everything needs to be instantaneous. Everything needs to be done at the snap of a finger, and if it's not, it's all ruined. To me, it's just that's such an unhealthy way of doing things. And I was very much like that, and I think I have over the years kind of realized that a lot of my anger problems, like true anger problems, not this existential anger that I will that I will have sometimes, right? The true anger, the ones that get me in trouble, really comes from a loss of control, and especially when it comes to a loss of control on my time and productivity. That's when I've broken 2 phones and 2 laptop screens, right? That's what caused that to happen. But over time, kind of taking a moment to say, okay, this is going to take X amount of time, right? This project I know is going to take at least an hour to finish. So I'm going to take that hour to do it. I'm going to budget myself an hour to do it. If it takes longer, that's okay. We'll have to amend what we need to amend, but it's not the end of the world, right? Just because I've taken 5 additional minutes to do this one thing that I, intended on doing. 5 additional minutes. That's not the end of the world. But that's not how we're programmed right now.
So what you're talking about is retraining your brain to take another perspective.
Yeah.
So quite often what we'll do is I'll do an exercise with people where I'll be standing in the middle of the room, and I'll ask them to stand in front of me, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
make a big smile. I'll say, what do you see? Well, I see your smiling face. And then I ask them to move around behind me, and I'll bend over, and I'll say, now what do you see? Well, I say, well, I see your butt. And I say, okay, well, did I move? And they say,
Right.
no, they moved. Okay. What most people get so frustrated with and irritated and cause the conflicts is because they try to manipulate the
Yeah.
person's
Mm-hmm.
situation or event, not understanding that they have a choice to move and
Right.
take another perspective.
And I think that's the individual aspect of it, right? The individual aspect of it is I can choose to see the world in a pessimistic and cynical light, or I can make a different choice and see what's good and see if we can't improve upon what's working.
Sometimes I'll challenge people. I'll say, which end of the horse are you looking at
Right,
today?
right, exactly.
And Krish, no one or anyone or anything, no people, place, thing, or situation can make you throw that cell phone across the room or smash a computer screen. Only you have the power to do that.
Yeah, you have to take a little personal accountability for it.
So what we
Yeah.
do is we give our choices and we give our power away.
Yeah, you have to let a little bit of that control go. You have to be willing to say that. And I'm not a very religious person,
Mhm.
but I'd like to think that there's something that's bigger than us that controls the way certain things work. I don't know what that is, but at certain points, you got to let it go. You got to understand that whatever this ethereal or cosmic force is, and I don't know what it is, right? You can call it what you need to call it, but sometimes that's going to take control, and that's going to take control of the wheel, and you just got to let it happen, because the more you fight it, the more you're going to frustrate yourself. So, in terms of whenever I'm having that moment, and we had this moment earlier today when we were getting ready to leave, and I was trying to, get rid of some things off my computer and just close it down, just shut it down for the day. It took a little bit longer than what it intended on doing, and I could feel it. I could feel that anger bubbling up, and immediately it was like, you know what? I got to let it do what it needs to do. I'm going to take the minute and let it catch up, and I can't, because me getting upset at this is I'm going to overwork it, which is going to keep slowing it down. I'm going to start getting upset, which Liz already doesn't like it. So then she's upset, and now we're slowing down even more, and it's spiraling us into this point where, talking about time being so precious, we're on a tight timeline, and now it's going to make it even tighter, and that's not good for either of us.
Sure.
So,
well, when time slows down, we slow down. So who
Yeah.
are some of your heroes? Who are some of the people you admire?
I think Stuart's a hero of mine, Stuart Huff.
Okay.
I look up to him.
So let's stop right there and
yeah.
let's talk about Stuart Huff.
Gladly.
How many hours in a day does Stuart Huff have? How many hours?
24.
24. He doesn't
Yeah.
have 30 or 40 or
Right.
50, does
Yeah,
he?
no.
Okay, so he's mindful about how he uses that time, is what you're telling me.
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he doesn't have any more time than you do. And when we slow down, time slows down.
Right.
There's a Latin phrase, it's called festina lente. It's called make haste slowly. And you can certainly make haste slowly if you're mindful about what you're doing, paying attention on purpose, doing one thing mindfully at a time.
I love that. That's what it's hard. It's hard to do. But slowly but surely it's crept more into my day. And it's huge in terms of what you want to do and how you want to do it. It's huge in compartmentalizing and organizing your day, and really getting done what you need to get done. So part of that is, and we both will kind of do this where, hey, I need to play guitar today, or I need to write today. Great. I'm going to need to focus on it for at least 2 hours. Great. That means that we don't disturb each other for that 2 hours. We kind of let ourselves concentrate on that. And
Sure.
at the end of that 2 hours, hey, I really need you to do this thing. Okay, I'm going to finish this sentence and I'll come back to it. I've spent 2 hours on it. Maybe I need a break. But that's because we're taking time to do what we need to do. And that's, I think that, but that's really hard.
Well, and again, now we're going to challenge you, Mr. Krish.
Yeah.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.